Welcome back to Deac2Deac. On this episode, I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to Mit Shah. Now, some of you know Mit through the Shah basketball complex on Wake Forest University's campus. Others know him as a leader in the hospitality industry. Some also know him as part owner of the Atlanta Hawks. Well, Mit sits down and he shares his love for Wake Forest, his passion for mentoring young people, and how he got into the business, and much, much more. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is none other than Mr. Mit Shah. Mit, how's it going today?
I'm doing really well. It's great to see you. Always nice to spend time with great Demon Deacons.
Well, Mit, I want to again thank you for taking the time to be a part of this. I know you're extremely busy. You have a lot going on, and so want to start from the beginning here. So, you grew up in Winston-Salem. What was that like growing up in Winston-Salem during that time?
Well, I always tell people, my love for Wake Forest starts with my love for Winston-Salem. As you said, my folks moved to Winston-Salem when I was 3 years old, and so I had the great opportunity to go, and I was at Brunson Elementary and Wiley Junior High, and then I was the second graduating class at Mount Tabor High School. It used to be a 910 high school, and then my junior year there was my sophomore year there was the first junior class, and my junior year was the first senior class, and then we were the second graduating class in 1987. And so the thing about Winston-Salem that I'll always have the greatest fondest memories is a combination of just the incredible people that formed a community. And we talk about community a lot and belonging in all kind of walks of life, right? Wherever you go, you want to feel like you belong. And so, my parents are immigrants, and, in Winston-Salem back when I was growing up in the 70s, in the 80s, there weren't a whole lot of people that looked like me, and prayed in Hindu temple and came from where I came from. And so, what I felt about Winston-Salem is that it was always a welcoming place for our family. For me, I was born here in the United States. My brother was born at Forsyth Hospital, my younger brother. And, that formative period of my life where I was, living, the American dream. Our family, we lived in a little neighborhood called Town and Country, in a little ranch home. I think, I've said this to you before. My dad was a food scientist at R.J. Reynolds Foods, and made $15,000 a year. But we had everything that we could ever want. I got a bike when I was 10 years old, and we used to ride around. And I tell you what, everybody has a love affair with their hometown, but especially for me, I loved it so much. I stayed home and went to school at Wake Forest.
Hey, that was great. And, I'm glad you did, to be honest with you. So I want to ask you something. As a kid growing up in Winston-Salem, during that 80s times, what were some of your favorite spots as a kid? Like, what are some places you would go, some things you would do?
Well, I love Joe White Tennis Center because that's where I grew up. We'd find our way there, and we'd be there from early in the morning till late at night. I also spent a fair amount of my time at the Central Y, and getting involved in any kind of pickup game that I could possibly do. If you remember, they were kind of across the street from each other, so that was kind of like where we lived. But then, we lived on a road called Lock Drive, and I remember, being able to bike to the movies. You'd be able to go to McDonald's, like that was right there. And so when I talk about community and belonging, all of those places had familiarity. And, now living in Atlanta, there's a lot of great positives about it. It's when you ask people, so where are you from? So from Atlanta. Well, it turns out they're really from Marietta, or they're from, Roswell, or they're from, and they just think about it as one big melting pot. Well, when you're from Winston-Salem, you're kind of from Winston-Salem. If you're from Pofftown, you're kind of like, Pofftown or Old Town. But that entire community there, where you literally didn't have to actually get in a car and you could be around people that were deeply caring to one another. Those are kind of the places. And so that's where I was growing up. But listen, I'll also say this. I was a member of the Boy Scouts. I think it was Troop 909 that was right over there up at the corner, kind of almost at the entrance to Wake Forest. That I spent a good amount of time there. But, every Saturday and Sunday morning from the time I was 10 years old to the time I went to Wake, I was working, at my parents' motel, which no longer exists. There's housing that's going up there called the Winkler Motor Inn. And, it's a real American dream story where a food scientist from Gujarat, India, shows up in the United States in 1965 and finds himself having the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. So that was a real family business. And so that's kind of where I spent my weekends, including after my junior and senior prom in high school.
Wow. That's you brought up several things, and I want to touch on something. In doing some research, I found out at 10 years old, you had a very sort of life-altering thing happen with your father and learning the business. Kind of talk about what that moment was like at 10 and the story around the vending machine and what you learned from that.
Well, it was the summer of 1979 that my parents became the proud owners of the Winkler Motor Inn. And so I was 10 years old at the time, and I just joined the Boy Scouts. And I think I got to join, I think you had to be 10 and a half, but they let me in. And the Boy Scout Jamboree was later that summer. And my whole goal was to figure out how I could get to go to this Boy Scout Jamboree. My dad, first-time entrepreneur, he's dealing with, customers and the craziness of being in the business. And I chose a really poor time to ask him if I could, have some money to go to this Jamboree. And instead of doing what I think, he would have been absolutely right in what to do, which is say, kid, what are you doing here? Don't you see, I've got a bunch of stuff going on. He took a moment in which to ask me what it was about, and then gave me a lesson that I'll never forget. It was at that time a customer had walked downstairs and was very upset the fact that the Pepsi machines upstairs were out of sodas. And to be fair, my parents didn't even know that whose responsibility were these Pepsi machines. And come to find out, they were our responsibility. So he made me a deal. He said, "Listen, we're going to make sure that you make enough money to go to the Jamboree." But understood what I just said: make enough money, because you saw what just happened. And these Pepsi machines need to get filled. And there's 3 of them on our property right now. So I'd like for you to go see Joe, who's head of maintenance here, and go figure out with him an ability to go buy these sodas, bring them back to the property, fill up the Pepsi machines, collect the money out of the Pepsi machines, roll up the quarters, take them to the bank, deposit them. And if you can do that, I'll split the profits with you 50-50. And tonight after dinner, I'll explain to you how all this works. So off I went. And said, all right, well, he said that I'm going to be doing just fine being able to, to go to the Jamboree if I did this. And lo and behold, what I learned was a scenario of business lessons that carried with me this kind of love and this passion about business. So the first thing we did is we went across the street to the grocery store and bought the Pepsis, came back, built the machine, got the money, went to the bank account. Realized that I needed to be a signer on the bank account. So my dad opened a bank account that had my name on it. So I learned lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, about the 5th time that I went to the grocery store, they said, "What are you doing buying all these sodas?" Told them exactly what I was doing. They said, "You do realize that if you're reselling it, you don't have to pay sales tax." I had no idea what sales tax was. I was 10 years old. And so now I learned that, that there was another opportunity to actually, make more of a profit, by understanding the legal rules that came into play. And then after a little while, you open up the paper, which I read voraciously because I was always looking for cheaper ways in which to go buy Pepsi. Every weekend I'm looking through the paper and trying to say, are there coupons? Is there a different store, et cetera? And all of a sudden there was an ad, Sam's Club opening up, selling wholesale, and the lowest prices. So I asked Joe, I said, "Can we go over to the Sam's Club?" got a card, went inside, and next thing you know, we were buying it wholesale. And in a month's time, I had gone from not knowing any of that to not only have enough money to go to the Boy Scout Jamboree, I was totally hooked. And that gave me kind of this thesis that even though my father was a scientist, has a PhD, et cetera, I felt like, there was something that I could do with this insatiable appetite for business.
That's huge at that age, to garner that lesson of not just, business, but also being willing to go out and earn, and not just earn enough just for the jamboree, but how do I maximize this opportunity? To learn that at 10 years old, that was a great lesson. So with the work at the motel, with being involved with the Boy Scouts and all the activities, when does sports become a big part of your life?
Well, first of all, I grew up playing tennis. I'd like to say that, while I got a spot as a walk-on our men's tennis team at Wake, I wasn't ever, very good. It ended up, just as an opportunity. I think I played in a couple of tournaments where I ended up getting to a third set and ended up, winning in front of one of our assistants at Wake, who basically told me I had a preferred walk-on position if I got there. And so that was something that I was I was playing since I was little. And the Joe White Tennis Center gave me the opportunity to go do that. Right. I mean, our incredible facility in Winston-Salem that's for the public just gave me an opportunity because we couldn't afford to do anything else. But I will tell you, and everybody has their when did you fall in love with sport of whatever. And for me, it was a sport of basketball. And it was, it was watching, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, go at it in the national championship game. And I was totally hooked. And then, this is how kids actually end up, fall in love with teams. And so in the 70s, when you were watching football, football wasn't carried on, every team on every Sunday. And so when my younger brother and I were watching football, he'd end up rooting for the Cowboys, and I'd end up rooting for the Steelers. Well, when I fell in love with the game of basketball, the black and gold, was Demon Deacons. And so he ended up being a Carolina fan, and I ended up growing up becoming a Wake fan. And then my dad took me one Saturday evening to the old Memorial Coliseum. We sat on the upper deck, and I made a poster board sign, and I'm cheering for my guys. And on the cover of the old black and gold, which you could have gotten when you went in there, I'll still remember this. It's crazy the stuff that you remember. It said, "Can Anthony teach a young team new tricks?" Right? And they were talking about Anthony Tichy and Danny Young and Mike Helms and Delaney Rudd, and all those guys, that were just, so fun to watch. And, Joan Carl Tacey. And I was hooked. I grew up and I ended up developing a pretty bad kidney disease. And I was in the hospital a fair amount while I was also growing up. And I would tell you my most treasured possession during that time period, alongside the love of my family, was a little transistor radio that they gave me where I could listen to Gene Overby call the Deacs. And I will always remember whenever he said bottom, I'm sitting there like in my hospital bed and I've just got goosebumps. And, it's funny the things that you think about that just gave you just joy and comfort, as you were growing up. We talked about Winston-Salem. We talked about the things that I did, but Wake Forest basketball was something that always gave me deep comfort, even when I was just a kid sitting in a hospital room, oftentimes just kind of, wondering, what was going to happen next. So that's how that love for sports kind of originated for me.
Well, are you still a Steelers fan?
I am a Steelers fan. Matter of fact, years later, and one of my very best friends to this day is Jerome Bettis. And JB lives right down the road from me and here. And so we play golf a couple times a month, et cetera. I've got a great I've got a great story here, and I'll digress for a second. So, when Skip when Skip first came to Wake, he and I became very, very good friends. Ron Wellman, asked me to be involved in that search. It was the first search at Wake Forest that I was involved in. And so Skip and I hit it off. And Skip's a Steeltown guy. He's a Pittsburgh guy. And so he loved the Steelers. So I surprised him one day, and I brought JB to the Wake Duke basketball game. And the boss goes into the locker like Skip wanted him to address the team and gives a fiery speech, before the game. And so, this is when Bettis is like, he's an all-pro. And so he's coming through Joel Coliseum, and everybody's wanting a little piece of him. And so finally they put security back behind the chairs, where we were sitting, on the court. And I hear this voice, like behind me, Mr. Shah, Mr. Shah. And I turn around, and it's this kid who I met, who was 16 years old. And I met him because he was on a recruiting visit at Wake Forest. And I was there at a meeting on campus, and Skip calls me and says, hey, I've got this kid from Winston-Salem. I think he's going to be pretty good. And says, and you grew up in Winston-Salem. I said, I'd love for you to come by and meet him and his mom and daddy. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. I walked in, and I met Charles and Rob and Paul. I met his big brother, CJ, and I met this little kid, Chris. And so now you're at the game, and he's yelling, saying, Mr. Shah, Mr. Shah. He goes, do you think I can come down and say hello to Mr. Bettis? And so I turned to the security guy behind me. I'm like, yeah, this kid's cool. So, so he comes down, and I go, JB, I said, this kid, he's a Winston-Salem kid, just like me. I said, he's going to come play for us. I think he's going to be really good. Skip loves him, and they dap it up and the whole thing. And to this day, because Jerome is like a 300 bowler in bowling, and Chris is like a real bowler. To this day, they still get together and go bowling.
That's an amazing story. I got something else for you to prove it, because some people say they're Steelers fans, but I've got something to show you.
Let's go. I love it.
My wife got that for me. I've always, so I played linebacker. Yeah. So I've always loved the way Dick LeBeau had that defense ready, and he had a great scheme, and he could take anybody and plug them into that scheme, and they want to be successful. And season after season, they had great defense to come through there, great players to really step up. That's an awesome story, man. So Jerome Bettis helped us get Chris Paul. That's amazing.
No, Chris had already committed before JB got there. So, it is. I tell you what, there is something special about incredibly successful people like Jerome, like Chris, who were raised right and treat everybody with respect. And they are who they are because of, the number one thing is that they're a good human being. And I think, out of all the things that, I value the most in life, is that I've been very blessed to be able to be around, to have my parents who, tried as hard as they could to raise me and my brother well, but to have this back to this community. These people, both in Winston-Salem and at Wake Forest, that have changed my life.
So what was it? You're in high school. What was it about Wake that made you decide, hey, this is where I want to go? Because a lot of kids, if they grow up in a certain town, the first chance they get to go out of town to college or university somewhere else, they're on the first thing smoking. What made you decide that, hey, Wake is where I want to be?
Well, Kevin, it's really, this isn't a glamorous story here. It was a couple of things. I was good enough academically, I think, at the time, to go to the handful of really good public schools that we've got in the state of North Carolina. And but Wake Forest being a private school, that was tough on my family at that time. And so the opportunity to come to Wake was really a couple of things. One, being able to walk on the tennis team was huge. Being able to root for the black and gold, was really, really important. But, my parents' number one focus was, education mattered more than anything else. So they scraped by and they borrowed money, and I got some student financial aid. But then I knew I had to go work, and I worked for 4 years at Graylyn Conference Center, which, oh, by the way, my work experience working, with the Winkler Motor Inn helped get me that job because I knew all the systems and the front desk systems and all of that and the like. So it was a combination of all of those things, right? This incredible academic institution, which, there's a real transformative power of education that exists, and the sacrifices my parents made, and the opportunity that Wake Forest provided. So all of those go in together, and that went into me choosing to go to Wake Forest.
So this is one question I've been waiting to ask you. So you go to Wake, you have a great experience there, and you graduate and you start working, and you start Noble Investment Group. So what was it? Kind of describe what went behind going to your parents and asking them to invest in you with, I think it was $1 million or $2 million. What kind of went into that? Because I got to be honest, when I graduated, I was afraid to ask my parents for like for help on the first month's rent in my new place. Yeah. But what was it that, you felt this confidence that they would see your vision?
Well, let me go backwards, and I'll go to that moment in time. When we all go through our own journey, we all think we know what that path is going to look like, but sometimes that path, takes real turns and pivots. But the one thing that, that our parents and, said to us, and we said to our own kids, et cetera, is that nobody can ever take away your education. Nobody ever can take away, the experiences that you've had. And so those experiences of working every Saturday and Sunday from the time I was 10 to the time I went to school at Wake, working the front desk, doing laundry, doing everything that needed to be done, helped give me the opportunity to go work at Graylyn Conference Center while I was at Wake. Now, so for 4 years, and Marriott used to run that conference center. So they were looking for somebody that had 3 years of experience on the front desk check-in system to go hire. I show up at the time as 17-year-old college freshman, and they're looking at me like, the ad was very specific. We need someone with 3 years experience, and I was like, I've got all of that, and I said, I can do this back and forth in my sleep. So I get that job. And so now they're taking me through, and I'm not just working the front desk. They put me as part of, the teams across the entire operation. So when I graduated from college in 1991, and this is the savings and loan crisis, and, it's a real recession. The offer and opportunity in Atlanta, I had 3 job offers: one to work for Centura Bank in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, one for work with Marriott and hotel operations, and then this small investment bank in Atlanta that was focused on investing in the hospitality industry because this new product type was being created: Hampton Inns, Marriott Courtyards, and the like, which were smaller than the bigger properties, had fewer full-time employees, and a 50% profit margin. But they were looking for somebody that had 5 years of hotel operating experience and a finance background to be a part of this team to go do it. Well, I just happen to be now a 21-year-old college graduate that has far more than the experience that they're looking for. So now I'm this kid in a group of people that are a lot older than I am. 6 months later, the guy that's running the group, one of the partners, leaves to go form their own shop, and it's the Wild Wild West. I'm meeting with, the heads of Marriott and other brands. I'm meeting with developers. I'm meeting with contractors, with architects. I'm learning how to read plans and specifications. I'm learning all the capital markets side of this. And in 3 years, so they never filled that position. So I ended up being 22 years old running this group, and they never filled the position. So 3 years later, I've done stuff that nobody should have ever been doing that was my age. I tell this to kids all the time. They're in college. Like, listen, I get the fact that so-and-so looks great on your resume. And this looks, really good relative to the experience. You're going to be in a cube. Here's your standard operating procedure manual. But if you got it in you to go somewhere where you're going to get experiences that you can never get anywhere else, and you got it in you, because you're going to have it in you. Some people really like the security of, here's, I'm going to go from an analyst to an associate to a director, and a director this, and just work my way up the food chain. But for me, I was just looking for soaking up those experiences because I'd started them so early. So by the time we get to the point where I'm talking to mom and dad about refinancing the Winkler Motor Inn and 50% of another motel property that they built, and essentially taking a little bit of money. The $2 million was what I needed to raise, but I needed some seed money to go do it. So there was a couple $100,000 of seed money that I could do. Now, mind you, they started off with zero. Dad was making 15 grand a year in 1979, right? This is the American dream. And his whole plan was he was just going to pay off the mortgage, and that was going to be it. But now here I come and say, hey, go and put some debt on this. Invest it with me and allow me to make more profits for you on it, but also allow me to set the business. And when I sat there and I went through it 3 different times on 3 different occasions, because they were asking more information. At the end of the day, my dad said to me, he goes, listen, you've thought well about this, and I believe that you're going to be successful. But let me explain to you the real driving force of why we're going to do this and provide you the ability to go and build your first property, the Hampton Inn in Peachtree City. It's because my parents borrowed everything that they could to put me on a plane ticket to send me to the United States. And that was my dream. And he goes, son, he goes, they didn't have anything. They were farmers in a small rural town in Gujarat state of India. And the only way out for me was to come to America and to start a process to live my dream. He goes, if this is the start of your dream, give it to you. But never forget, right, that your responsibility is to uphold the family name. And that's how this whole thing started. Would have never happened if my grandparents wouldn't have sacrificed for my parents, and it never would have happened if my parents didn't sacrifice for me. And I don't carry the weight of that. I carry the badge of honor of that. Like that's like, man, that's, And so you told me that you were there when, and I know I'm fast forwarding, but you told me there that you were there that night that they dedicated the basketball complex. And I'll tell you, my father and I, he's not only my very best friend in the whole world and my hero. We don't talk a lot about that, right? We talk about the relationship he had with his father, our relationship I have with my son and daughter, and the relationship that he has with his grandkids. But we don't talk about respect and honor, because the name Noble is a name that we use around the house. Name my company, that I founded. It's a name we use around the house. It's about, not doing the most lucrative thing, not doing the easiest thing, always do the right thing, the noble thing. And so that was always going to be the name of whatever I did, is to be that, because it is what it is. You probably remember the comment when they surprised me and asked my father to introduce me that night. He said one thing there that, it literally took me a while to stop, to compose myself. He made a comment that he said that he wished that his father was there to see how his grandson honored the family name. And, again, as I think about this, and I think about, all of our families, Kevin, your family, my family, all of my friends' family, there's a big part of this where we're all just here, standing on the shoulders of giants, and making sure that whoever comes after us, understands that there were sacrifices made for them to be here. And they shouldn't wear that as any burden. They should look at it as an opportunity to see, What trees can they plant in the future for others to stand in the shade?
Yeah, that's a saying I love to use is sometimes you have to plant a tree that you'll never sit up under.
Yep.
And how does it feel for you when you can now uh, take your kids to Wake's campus, or they can Google your name and see where you have taken it, not just, sort of, keeping it, but to continue to elevate it and your involvement. And even though you've had this huge amount of success in varying things, you still, again, remember where you come from. And, how does that feel to be able to, again, connect your kids to that name, but to see your work and to see it grow?
I hope it's like my father described it, which is it's really just out of honor to the fact that I'm very privileged and fortunate to be here, every time that people want to talk about the challenges that we have in our country and the things that we've got in which to deal with. I do want to reflect on the fact that we live in the greatest country in the world. We have tremendous challenges, tremendous issues that we've got to deal with. But no other place in the entire world could my family's story have happened in the way that it's happened. There's no other place across this planet that would have given my father the opportunity for an education like he had, my mother the ability to help raise my brother and I, and this is something that I feel like for our kids and hopefully their kids, they'll recognize that when I use this comment, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. That the opportunities are really boundless. It is whatever you decide to do with them. And I think grit is not something that you're truly able to be pushed in which to go do. Like you got to have it, right? And I hope that our kids, which I know that they do, they're grown, they're older now. Our son's almost 23 and our daughter's 19. But I hope that they realize that through grit and effort and endurance and values and that this is how you lead a life that matters.
That's great. I love a quote that you use a lot, which is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Did I get that right?
You did get that right. You did get that right. It's actually funny. So it's actually my son's favorite quote, and so he has learned learned a little bit about that. But look, we're all proud of our kids. We're all proud of the families that we're a part of, and I think it is incumbent upon us as parents and leaders. Not just for our children, but for those that are in our community. I go back to, you asked me a question about Winston-Salem. What do I remember? I remember all those people that I hope they know this, that were so instrumental in my life because they were just good human beings. They treated me like one of their own. I'm now old enough to have my friends who, we're losing parents, and it's the cycle of life. And every time I get a chance to speak to one of my childhood friends, I want to let them know how important, their parents were to me, because they let me come over and spent the night and we had fun, and they, treated me like their own child. And that there's something to be said for that love and affection of a community, which is what I believe makes Wake Forest special. If you ask a student, what do they love the most about their experience at Wake Forest? It is the feeling of belonging that they had, right? And wherever that might be, whether it was the football team, whether it was in the religion department with that one great professor that helped you understand something like, man, why am I have to take this? Why do I have to take this class? But like, oh my God, this thing's helped change my life, and that place and that feeling of belonging, it doesn't happen just because we're a smaller school, or because simply that, we just care more than everybody else, or this or that. I mean, there's a DNA and ethos of this place that makes you feel like, you are a part of something. And that to me, truly, my most favorite quote, Kevin, that I would tell you is actually what Skip, showed me. He actually made me fall in love with Emerson, the poet. And Skip's favorite quote, which is now mine, which is our chief want in life, is someone to inspire us to be what we could become. And Skip lived that. He wanted to make sure, he wasn't a basketball coach. He was an educator. He was a mentor. He was a teacher. He was a guide. Your head coach, Jim Caldwell, felt very much the same way, right? Lifelong, like stewardship and being there for you and for your family. Doesn't matter where, when you played for them and the like. But that's our responsibility. So my responsibility, I've been honored to be a trustee at Wake Forest for 15 years. Actually, my first meeting as a trustee was the very inauguration of Dr. Hatch. So we've been, on this journey, and I've witnessed the incredible leadership that he and our cabinet have had to make, Wake Forest, an even better place, than the place that, you went to school at, or I went to school at. And, we all dream big, and to see our alma mater continue to take these big strides forward, there's a lot of pride there.
Well, you want to talk about moving things forward. How does it feel to be such an integral part in helping continue to move Wake Forest forward? How does that feel as a trustee, as someone who has given their time and energy and resources to help move Wake Forest? How does that feel to be one of those people?
Well, I would have imagined it as a student. Matter of fact, coming out of public school, Wake Forest was hard for me early on, especially with working and playing tennis and the like. So the fact that I get to play a really valuable role for me, something that as I think about the things that we all can't do, all the things that we want to do, it's just not enough time, right? Family comes first. Nothing matters more than that. And then we have other things, professionally, but then on a civic standpoint, we all want to give back. I chose Wake Forest as a central place for me to give back, fundamentally because I believe that we can change the course of higher education at Wake Forest that can make a difference in this world. Now, those are all big, like thoughts and ideas, et cetera. Higher education costs too much. The Wake Forest education, while super valuable, we need to find some balance as it relates to that. But we need to continue to figure out a way how we can afford to bring in the very best educators across the world onto our campus, and then to invite the brightest students from around the world to come in. Allow those that need it to not have the burden of the cost of a Wake Forest education, and then do things that are transformational in our world. And what are those things, right? Whether it is preparing ourselves for the very next pandemic, whether it is making a difference in food, availability across communities, whether it's changing the socioeconomic structure of our lives and putting a stake in the ground around social injustice, whether it is truly allowing every student that arrives here to go on to lead lives that matter in something. We can do that at Wake Forest, right? It's more than just a school where you put the black and gold on and you cheer for your team. It's a place that can truly change our world at a time where arguably we need it the most. In order to do that, stewardship is very important, not just financial stewardship, right? But strategic planning, thoughtfulness. How do we go about it? So having the role that I've been very fortunate to have for as many years in helping to plant the seeds about what the Wake Forest of the future could be is one of the great honors of my life. And we are only on a journey, going forward there. The Wake Forest that I envision is a place that we combine world-class educators with students of every background, no matter where you came from, how much money your family has, what church or temple that you pray in, what conditions have you had to deal with? You find a place, people that are driven to make a change, where we can bring it all together and do things that will, impact our country, our community, and our world in a meaningful way. And I think little things, take what we're just done with Atrium Health. What you will see is Wake Forest becoming, I believe, the #1 academic medical center in all of the United States. And the ability for us to impact communities and lives through availability of medicine, doctors, like research and the like, will make a major difference in our world. Those are the kinds of the things that I envision for Wake Forest over the next generation as we go forward. So I've tried to answer your question in a very simple way, that while it has great pride, there's a deep mission here, a very deep mission. And while we all love winning, ACC championships and competing for national championships, on the field and on the courts, by the way, super important, because where do you get millions of eyeballs on our university and what we're doing, right? When we're playing for an ACC championship, or when we're going to the Final Four, that's when you go see that, and the whole world gets to see what Wake Forest is all about. So make no mistake, my investments in those areas are partly about the passion and the gratitude that I have for that transistor radio when I was a kid, at Baptist Hospital. But a big part of that is that I believe that it helps us to share the mission of Wake Forest on a global footprint.
Mit, I love that. And what I really love is the fact that you said transistor radio, and I knew exactly what you were talking about. I love that. I love it. I want to talk about Noble Investment Group for just a quick second. Sure. And essentially, it grew from your initial acquisition of three hotels.
We built the Hampton Inn in Peachtree City.
Yeah. How did it? So, two questions. Where is it at now? And where do you see Noble in, say, maybe 10 years, considering going through this pandemic?
Sure. Well, my good fortune, in terms of the people that I'm around, runs deep. I was very fortunate early in my career to have a group of leaders that I was able to put together at Noble. We've now been together an average of over 20 years. And collectively, we've invested over $4 billion in communities across the United States in hotels. We have created tens of thousands of jobs. We invest our own capital, but we also invest on behalf of some of the foremost state public pension plans, university endowments and foundations, essentially as a fiduciary on behalf of our country's school teachers, law enforcement, firefighters, financial aid for students to go to college. And so, everybody has kind of, what do we do? How do we do it? I think more recently people wanted to talk about, why do you do what you do, right? There's a financial outcome for what we do. And at the root of that is we are a fiduciary, I believe, for the greater good. And our success, we have, for every investment that we made, we have 100% fully realized every investment from 1993 through 2015. So coming out of the savings and loan crisis, the ruble collapse of 98, the dot-com bust of 2000, the tragedy of 9/11, and the great financial crisis, every investment that we've made across that entire duration, all the way up through 2015, we have 100% fully realized at a track record that our institutions say is in the top 1%. So that gives me great pride in that our success has led to their success, and it gives us a chance to keep going and to have even more success. So, this pandemic is something that is tragic on a number of different levels. The amount of lives lost, health issues that will continue, job loss that has taken place, and clearly a lot of businesses that have had significant crisis at their doorstep. The hospitality industry will be down over 50% this year, over 19. To put that into context, that is over twice the total impact of the dot-com bust, the tragedy of 9/11, and the great financial crisis combined. So, with that, crisis, it will root out the non-specialist. And fortunately, we had sold the vast majority of hotels back to this realized track record in 2018, 2019. So, what we have in front of us, we believe, as we come out of this crisis, the vaccine is not a matter of if now. Herd immunity is something that we're talking more and more about. People and their ability in which to see other people is a part of the entire social spirit. I will tell you, I was on a call earlier, and people, have significant amount of Zoom fatigue. But people are also recognizing that this entire discussion around, students and going to virtual only classes. Go ask any student that you know. How do you love online classes? And they can't wait to get back in front of their teachers in the frenetic energy that exists. So there will be a change in terms of demand. There will be, some that may not go back for a considerable amount of time. You'll have winners and losers. You'll have cities that will win and lose. You'll have, parts of the lodging industry that will win and lose. And then you'll have investors that will win and lose. But we do believe that it could be the very, most significant opportunity that we've seen, and now approaching our 28th year in business.
That's amazing, an amazing story. And I want to ask you about one other thing. So, let's see. So I want to ask you about one other thing. So you're in Atlanta and you have this great passion for basketball. How did you end up becoming part owner of the Atlanta Hawks? How did that happen?
It's a great story. So I've never, that's never been a part of my dream or anything. I mean, my love affair with game basketball. I already had, to be honest with you, I had the best seats in State Farm Arena. My seats are I have the best seats. So when Tony Wrestler and Grant Hill called me, they were looking for a partner in Atlanta. And someone that could, help the Atlanta Hawks organization, be a part of it, to go make a difference in this community. And we thought about a plan whereby, the Atlanta Falcons, that's really Arthur Blank's foundation. And the Braves are owned by a media conglomerate. And with the game of basketball, one kid can go out with a ball and shoot hoops. Two, you got a game, and the global influence of this sport is unlike any other sport that exists, with the possible exception of soccer. And we thought that we could create something with the Hawks on a couple of different fronts. That number one, we could create a championship program by, getting a G League team, putting it in the arena, putting the best strength, conditioning, fitness, technology, biometrics facility in all of professional sports, together. So we're a development program. We've got a G League, get a best coach, completely, revitalize the arena. But alongside of that, we could become a community team. And what our plan is to go out to every part of this community in need, and let's go build community centers with courts and physical environments, and teach older kids how to coach, teach younger kids how to play the game, give them a place to go, and give them jerseys and shoes and make this something for our community in Atlanta. My wife and I, my wife Reshma and I, this has been my home since 1991. Like Winston-Salem's where I grew up. I'll always have my heart there. But this is our community where we grew up, to have the ability to go do that. And then on top of that, to have the ability to make a difference in this community. But then also, so a part of this is that the second largest minority in the state of Georgia are those of Indian descent. Matter of fact, if you count the last 10 college presidents at Georgia State, Emory, Georgia Tech, and UGA, 2/3 of them are kids of Indian descent. That's a big population, and one day there's going to be some kid, the Yao Ming of India, that's going to show up, on an NBA court. I don't know when, but someday that's going to happen. But can you imagine, engaging an entire community to help be a part of that, to give back to this community, to do it in a material way? So as the pandemic hit, I used that platform, and we invested. Our family foundation, the Hawks Foundation, as well as the Indian community here, and we collectively fed 10,000 families. And provided educational resources for kids that couldn't go to school and the like. And so this is about mobilizing community through the game of basketball, and people's love for that. So that's really what drove it. I will also tell you that I'm a big believer in peer groups. My first question to my entire team every year is, tell me who you're adding to your peer group. Who is the person that's out there that you want to learn from, get advice from, go to when you're looking at things, whether that's as a parent or whether that's as a leader, and the like. And so for me, it's a never-ending journey. I'm a lifelong learner. And so this peer group between, Tony Wessler and Grant Hill, who's my guy, and then, Jesse Itzler and his wife, Sarah Blakely, Sarah, founded Spank. This is a tight group of people that as parents, and as stewards, and it's just human beings. We spend an awful lot of time together, that's adding real value to mine and my wife's life.
I got to toss this in there. How did it feel on draft day to see John Collins fall and be available? Tell me that felt great.
So yeah, listen, we had him. I'm in the room. We just hired a new general manager. So he's a new general manager. I had taken our assistant general manager to come see Wake play Duke, and so he saw John. He's the only person that saw John play, because John didn't work out for us because he was supposed to be in the lottery. We had the 19th pick, right? So his agent wasn't letting him work out for us, and so we had him, high on our draft board, nowhere near us. And so all of a sudden he keeps dropping, right? And I got to know John, and, I saw him in LA before the draft, and we're like, I'm texting, his guy, at time, it's like, dude, we're taking him because it never happens. Look, we picked the pick after a few years before that. We picked the pick after Devin Booker. The year before that, we had the pick after Giannis. Okay, this never happens where you drop, at that level, and it was totally done. And there's a video. Our general manager Travis Slank. This again his first year. He'd never seen the kid. He picks him. He goes, "All right, man." He says this in front of we're in the war room, right? Which is the best time of the year. We're in the war room. He's like, "All right, man." And you know what? John is so special. And he is such a good human being. He's such a good player. Obviously, he's a really great teammate. He's an incredible, I think, voice in Atlanta. And look, my obvious hope is that he has an incredible career here in Atlanta. But this kid is a wonderful representative of his mama, Lyria, who is, she's like that, and he is going to have an incredible long career in the NBA as an amazing steward of Wake Forest. Every time I see this kid, like he's just walking around, he's got weight gear on, you know? And I was like, dude, do you need me to get you some Hawks gear? He goes, no, this is like.
That's great. And there's another Demon Deacon with the Hawks, Melissa Proctor. I think she works in marketing.
She might be the best chief marketing officer in the NBA.
Awesome.
She might be the best chief marketing officer in the NBA. She's phenomenal. Totally
awesome. I ordered her book. I can't wait to hopefully have a chance to have a conversation with her. She's doing some awesome things. I want to ask you one last question. So what would you say to a young person that is, they're maybe sophomore, junior year, trying to figure things out? What advice would you offer to that person in terms of, as you keep saying, that American dream and pushing through and, making things happen? What would you say to that person, that young student?
I believe that they should always remember that no one's journey ever goes according to plan. You put yourself into situations that I believe, help allow you to take the next step. But they should remain relentless in just, always keeping the faith that their endeavors, being a good soul, continuing the work endeavors will have a positive outcome. Those things aren't lost on anyone. And but you can't take shortcuts. I see a lot of times people just want to get from one phase to another phase, and this, right? I mean, there just aren't shortcuts. I've always thought of a very simple way of thinking about it. Everybody has dreams, right? And there are those that were very intentional to help me achieve mine. My job is, to do what I can to help others achieve theirs. They can surround themselves with those kinds of people in their lives, with a high degree of work ethic, and a desire for, doing things that benefit others, including themselves. That's hard to beat. I've seen that success story play out over and over and over again. I think that those are things that people should always keep, very close to them.
Well, Mitt, this has been wonderful. I've enjoyed this conversation, and when things clear up, I've got to get to Atlanta to a Hawks game and check this out. And again, thank you for taking the time out and spending some time to share your story and offer some insight and direction. It has been awesome.